We have with us.
Yeah, Gabriel Young, Northern California President of the National Federation of Filipino American Association. Hi, Gabriel. Thanks for joining us again.
Kumusta po? Thank you so much for having me. Happy to always be here.
Well, Gabriel, all we have right now are videos on social media as to what's happening. It seems like something of a movie, but maybe you can paint us a clearer picture of what it's like or what's happening right now.
Yes, no, absolutely. And this is very personal for me because my own brother goes to university over in Los Angeles. And just yesterday, it was his birthday. And so my mom, who lives here in the Bay Area, wanting to make sure that my brother is safe, made sure to go down to Southern California and get my brother out of the downtown Los Angeles area out of fear that he might be in danger or of the traffic or the riots that might be caused or the violence that's ensuing. And so I will note though, despite all that we see on social media, there's also the different picture on the ground where a majority of demonstrators are peaceful. We just had a demonstration here in San Francisco, California, and then for me, I work in Sacramento, California, where we also saw demonstrations as well. And all these demonstrations remind me again of EDSA back then in 1986, where we saw peaceful protesting, but when you have the few bad apples that decide to make it violent, that's when the news begins to capitalize, and that's when fear then begins mongering in our own communities. So I believe that the media paints one picture, but those on the ground, especially my own friends at the Filipino Workers Center down in Los Angeles, also are telling me that it's mostly peaceful compared to what we see on the news.
Right. I was wondering if you have a comment on the issue of what could be the economic impact of such arrests that they have been doing, knowing that LA's fashion sector relies heavily on immigrant labor, and there are reported disruptions such as absenteeism, stalled production, and financial damage.
Yes, no, absolutely. So immigrants, in my opinion, are the backbone of our economy. Ever since the Bracero program that we saw with President Bill Clinton bringing over undocumented Mexicans into the United States, and of course with NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, really solidifying that. So undocumented immigrants are the backbone of the U.S. economy. And so when you remove all the laborers from the United States, especially here in California, we're the fourth largest economy, and our huge sectors are mostly in agriculture, where undocumented immigrants are the ones picking the berries and the vegetables the entire world eats. We're going to see massive economic repercussions. We're already seeing economists come out and say that with the tariffs that have already been imposed, that we're going to see an economic downturn. But when you remove the labor force, then having to actually pay folks a much higher wage, especially those who are documented here in the United States, then we're going to see economic slowdown. Additionally, there is this narrative out there that undocumented immigrants are just stealing resources from the United States, but on the economic perspective, undocumented immigrants pay almost over $1 billion into taxes in the United States using what is called an individual tax identification number, also known as ITIN. And so not only will all businesses in the private sector start slowing down with their laborers being retracted, but also on the government side too, that we're going to see countries doing less with us because we can't get products out, but also less government revenue coming in because of these undocumented immigrants being pushed out of the country.
Yes, Gabriel, let's take this discussion a little back to the flashpoint, to what triggered all of these protests. We've all heard the pronouncements of California Governor Newsom. We know that ICE had the initial quota, but what sparked the actual protest? And I'd like to ask, since we have a different in structure, our kababayans here asking, what is the governor's function right now at this moment for California?
Absolutely. So one thing that's very important to know about the United States governance is we operate on the system called federalism, where each state has their own governor. Think about it in the sense of if Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao each had their own governor, that they don't necessarily legislate, but they're just in charge of their regions. And so with that, states have certain rights that are protected under our Bill of Rights, especially under the 10th Amendment, which says that any law that is not stated in the United States Constitution, that is created by state legislatures or governors, those states have the power to either create their own laws or enforce their own laws. And so, particularly with Governor Newsom, the big issue that's coming up here is an issue of states' rights, that each state is also allowed its own militia, its own military. And in this case, what we see in the news, the National Guard. And so California has its own National Guard, Texas has its own National Guard. And there's a certain law in the United States Code that says that a president of the United States can bypass the governor's control, or just as we hear, like commander-in-chief of sorts of the National Guard, if there is a emergency such as a war. However, there is no war going on right now. And so what is going on and sparking this entire debate of sending troops down to Los Angeles, despite Mayor Karen Bass not even asking for troops, Governor Newsom not asking for the federal military to be moved in either, is the Governor Newsom's own power being bypassed almost illegally. And so now it becomes a question of the rule of law, that if our own country cannot uphold its own laws because our own sitting president is bypassing them, who else is to say that the lawlessness that will occur? And one thing I'd really like to emphasize is our own Department of Homeland Security, Kirsty Noem, is even on the record of not even knowing the law of habeas corpus, which states that you can't arrest someone in times of war as well. And so when our own leaders don't even know the law and start to ignore judicial rulings, then it becomes really scary.
Yeah.
Just today, we saw a own California senator being arrested just because he asked a simple question within a press briefing. And we have respect for our senators here in the United States. Him walking in, he should have been given the time, but instead he gets detained by our own federal law enforcement, which, as everyone is saying, even our own governor, is worrying signs of fascism. And so Governor Newsom is just calling all states, all Americans, to be aware of what could happen when the president decides to overlook the checks and balances that make our government what it is.
Gabriel, I'd just like to clarify something. Now, supposedly, the federal government, or ICE, is supposed to conduct these deportations based on a vetted list, supposedly, that they already have. But I've heard reports that they are not following the list anymore, given the quota, and what they are doing is randomly picking up people who they think, based on the skin color of their skin or ethnicity, and then that's the only time they will verify the identity. Is that what is happening?
Even those who don't have criminal records.
Yes, no, you are absolutely correct. And what we're calling it here in the United States is an overlooking of due process. So due process is defined that each citizen, and also anyone who's undocumented here in the United States, is allowed the rights that are conferred by our own Constitution, and, if you will, the process of governance. And so with that, when ICE is bypassing the rule of law that they must show their warrants whenever they're picking someone up, that they must go through and make sure that they're only arresting folks who are undocumented, they are arresting citizens and permanent residents and even those on green cards. And so here in the nonprofit sector, especially of NaFFAA, we are really emphasizing the message of know your rights, especially as immigrants. Make sure you have your red cards, which list all your rights, but also that even if you are a citizen, know that they aren't just coming for undocumented immigrants. They're coming for anyone that they can racially profile and easily
And reach the
detain.
quotas.
Yes, one specific example that I really love to give, especially here in the National Federation of Filipino American Associations, Northern California, we work very closely with the San Francisco Philippine Consulate and DFA, and we were very supportive of their process to get Maximo Londino out from the illegal detainment that ICE has also put them through. Our own kababayan, who was detained in the Seattle-Tacoma airport, who had all their papers, but was unfortunately racially profiled. So whatever's happening to the Latino community is also happening to us Filipinos. So it's not just specific of what's going on to LA and the fear that's being stoked amongst Latinos who are being racially profiled, but even us Filipinos. Look, even our last names are similar. Like, we have our De La Rosas, we have our De La Cruzes,
Right.
and so it's a real fear that us Filipinos will also get racially profiled and also incriminated
But it
too.
looks like, Gabriel, it's going to go past state issues. It's going to go federal, given the fact that the Marines, I heard, are now empowered to detain based on how they, on what they think is constitutes somebody who is going against the order of ICE. It's very vague, but what is your take on that?
It is for us in coalition with all of our other Filipino American nonprofits. We're in a policy coalition called the Fierce Coalition, the Filipinx Igniting and Engaging Collective Empowerment. We're getting almost collective trauma again of what happened in the 80s under President Ferdinand Marcos, and many of our families and immigrants who have escaped with sort of the extrajudicial, not just killings, but also the disappearances of families and friends. And so what we're seeing with the military coming in is almost reminiscent of that. And so all of us seeing the Marines coming in, it's stoking a real fear where there doesn't have to be fear, where we can go through the judicial process. We can talk to each other as elected officials, and especially as Governor Newsom is putting it, really be that fourth branch of government, having the role of a citizen within government to stand up when we see oppression and fascism starting to rise up. It's not even about trying to be a strongman and maintaining quote-unquote control of the country, but it's about validating the humanity and giving humane practices to all. A 4-year-old girl was detained for all we can say. And so one thing that I do want to leave us off with is we're very lucky here in California, let alone the Northern California region, where our own Kuya, who was in community, Attorney General Rob Bonta, actually was able to get a court order to pause the National Guard being activated under President Trump alongside Governor Newsom. And so California is really being an example, I would say, to what democratic resistance and let alone peaceful resistance following the role of court of law and rule of law to show what the rest of the country should be doing as well, and pushing back when there is large presidential overreach. So again, if there's one thing that I can say is just we have to continue being peaceful, we have to keep working with each other, and we need to keep understanding what it means to be Filipino, having that spirit of resilience to push back when oppression and fascism is rising up against us.
Very well said. We will continue to get in touch with you regarding this issue. For the meantime, thank you so much for your time. Gabriel Young, Northern California President of the National Federation of Filipino American Associations. Thank you so much.